Radiant and Resilient is about mindset and faith to break paradigms and overcome challenges in our life. Because when the mind, body, and spirit are aligned, we literally radiate from the inside out. I'm Kay Vasquez. Let's dive in.
When I met Heather Medlin, I was part of a mentoring group while I was pregnant. And when she was introducing herself, I loved her passion about what she was teaching pregnant and postpartum women. It was something called Elimination communication. And it sparked my curiosity. And I definitely was interested in learning more because as I was pregnant, this was something I wanted to implement once I had my baby. And now I get the pleasure talking to Heather, of interviewing her to share more about what elimination communication is and the importance of why we should do it, as well as sharing my own experience of doing elimination communication, especially now that I am 8 weeks postpartum at the time that I'm recording this interview. Heather's just a beautiful, vibrant soul. She's also a redhead like me, which I love. It's always great to meet other fellow redheads and just super, super passionate about what she does. Like, you can really feel it. And if you aren't familiar with her, I definitely recommend checking out her Instagram page because, like I said, you can feel her passion there. And she provides so much information, so much value, so much knowledge that can really help someone on in their journey. So welcome to Radiant and Resilient, Heather.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm so glad that you fit me in at 8 weeks postpartum. I know how difficult and wonderful and full that season can be.
Oh my goodness, it's been quite an interesting, challenging, but beautiful journey and experience already, because just so many changes, right? And you really have to adapt to a different way of life now that you have a little one. And so I'm just so excited to interview you because when I met you and, learned about EC through you, it helped me to start implementing that when my daughter was 5 days old. And a lot of people may think that's crazy.
I thought you said 5 weeks. No, you started at 5 days.
No, 5 days. Yeah, 5 days old. So yeah, we were talking a little bit about just sharing with Heather before we recorded, just like when I started. And I've been sharing little moments here and there ever since. But yeah, 5 days old when I put her on well, actually, before I share that, I'm going to let you talk about EC. What is elimination communication first? So that way, those that are listening are like, wait, what are they talking about? So share, what is EC?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So a lot of people have never heard the phrase elimination communication. And quite simply, it just means when your baby is communicating, so letting you know that they need to eliminate pee or poop. It's that simple. You may also have heard it referred to as natural potty training or infant potty training, natural infant hygiene. In many parts of the world, this is widely practiced. It is just the normal way to take care of babies, and there is no name. And so a lot of indigenous cultures and cultures without ready access to disposable diapers or just without the disposable income to buy them easily, they just do this as a matter of course. It's just how babies are taken care of. And it is quite as simple as you eat, you put food in your mouth. You need to pee, you put the baby on the potty. It just is. So in the US and in a lot of Western countries, now you will hear it referred to as elimination communication, but it just means when your baby is communicating their need to go potty. We are actually programmed as mothers and parents and as little baby humans to have this connection. And just like we would be able to recognize when our baby is hungry, and we can recognize that specific hunger cry or the specific cry or face that means, oh, they're so tired, they're rubbing their eyes, their face is getting red. We know what that means as parents. And so we can learn to read these body language cues, the specific cry sound that your baby will have associated with the potty, just as easily as we can learn to read those other cues, and we respond. And so the big difference is that when you're practicing elimination communication with your baby, or EC, we'll call it EC for the purposes of this conversation, when you are recognizing these signals, you just respond by taking your baby to the potty and offering. And this is really based on the fact that your baby does not actually want to soil a diaper. They are not programmed to poop on themselves, which we are actually the only mammal, potentially the only animal in the animal kingdom that teaches our young to poop on themselves and wear that. We're also the only animal that wears clothes, so there's that. But diapers are useful. I'm not going to ever say diapers are not useful. They are certainly a tool, especially because we live in houses and we wear clothing. But we are not innately designed to soil ourselves. And so your baby comes with this incredible reflex and instinct. It's really a survival mechanism to be able to recognize inside of their own body that they need to go, to communicate it to you and ask for help. So it's actually a very, very natural process that we are instinctually programmed to do with our babies from the beginning.
Thank you for explaining that, because you said it perfectly. You know, we're just conditioned as mothers and as a society just to put the diapers on the baby, and we don't realize like the natural instinct. It's so funny because I teach my clients about how to tune into their bodies. And how beautiful is it to like allow the baby to tune into their body and to eliminate when they feel the urge? Because as you mentioned, and if you think about it, who wants to sit in a poopy wet diaper? It's
No
not
one.
comfortable. It's not enjoyable. So to be able to teach our kids how to eliminate, and there's also so many benefits. We're also reducing the consumption of so many diapers. There's so many diapers that are put into the landfills that are not being disposed of because they're made out of plastics and lots of chemicals and toxins and things like that, which also affect the body long term. All the chemicals that we get exposed to at birth. I mean, there's so many tangents I can go
It's a cycle.
off of, right? Just from just this exactly from this conversation alone, but it's different things to think about. So when you were explaining what EC was to me, it opened my eyes because I never heard of it before. But I was talking to a cousin of mine, and she's like, one of my nun friends said that, you know, this is what Jesus's mother did, right? And if you think about it, back in the day, they didn't have diapers, they didn't have wipes. You know, they probably had maybe a cloth around them or a cloth diaper. In fact, I had cloth diapers when I was a baby. And so naturally they learned to pick up on the baby's cues, exactly what you said, when they're hungry, when they're sleepy, but also when they need to pee and poop. And so with what I learned from you at 5 days old, I decided to give it a go. After I had fed my baby girl, I was looking for the cue and she started getting fidgety. And I was like, oh, I think this is it. So I put her on the potty and she peed. And I was like so surprised because I didn't expect it to happen, but it did. And it was so easy. It was so easy. And I think that's one of the things
that's what
that
everyone says. They try it.
Like how easy it is. So yeah, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your story too, and how you got into EC, because you have a couple kids. One child you didn't do it with, and the second one you did. So share a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. So first of all, I never expected to be the lady talking about poop on the internet. This is not what I went to school for or expected to be doing. I am a licensed architect by training. I have spent a decade in the professional architecture sustainability community, and that's what I do the career. And then when I had my first son, who is almost 4 now, my daughter's almost 2, I had never heard of EC. I was very interested in cloth diapers. I had gotten a set of hand-me-down newborn cloth diapers. I had ordered some secondhand, like all-in-one cloth diapers for my son. I was so committed to the sustainability factor of cloth diapering because I understood then just the severe environmental impact that, you know, years of disposable diapers from every single child everywhere is having on our environment. And so I was very conscientious of the environmental aspect at the time, but no one around me, no one in my family, no one in my friend circles, no one that I knew of was doing EC with their baby. So it wasn't even on my radar. And I distinctly remember this moment when my son was about 2 weeks old. We were staying at my dad's house, and I was holding my son, and he was screaming and he needed to go to sleep. I was trying to put him down for sleep, and we just had dinner. I just breastfed him. He was like ready for bed, and he wasn't going to sleep. And he was just screaming his head off. And I was like, what is going on? Clay, my partner, and I were kind of like, maybe he needs to poop. Maybe he's gassy. Oh, he's working on a poop. We kind of were like, he's working on a poop. So of course we tried the bicycle kicks. We tried the baby massage and, going around the circle and all the things. And he just got angrier and angrier. I finally kind of felt him relax. I mean, we did this dance for maybe 20, 30 minutes. It was exhausting. I'm sure if you've ever had a crying jag, you know what I'm talking about. And we finally got him to go to sleep. But what I didn't realize was that it wasn't that he had poop in his diaper and he was trying to get me to change it. He needed to poop or he needed to pee, and he was trying to let me know that he needed help. And of course, that's what he needed. He had just eaten. It had been a few minutes. He was ready to go. And I had zero idea. Even in my completely unaware brain at the time, like sleep deprived, was like, I think he's working on a poop. I think he needs to poop. I knew that instinctively, but I didn't know what to do with that information because no one around me had ever done anything with that information other than like slap a diaper on a baby and keep going. So we did business as usual with our son for about 15 months. It was around that time that I heard, hey, Shayla, I'm going to throw her out and shout out to Shayla, on her podcast. And she interviewed Andrea Olson, who's like the godmother of EC. And she's not the only one who's ever talked about it, but she's like the most well-known person who's ever talked about it. She wrote the book, Go Diaper Free. So if you've heard of EC, you've probably heard of Andrea Olson. So I'm listening to her having this conversation with Shayla. And Shayla's like, so my daughter's 18 months and she's still in diapers. What do I do? And she's like, you just have to get rid of the diapers. Have you ever tried just getting rid of the diapers and seeing what happens? And of course, Shayla was like, oh. And I was like, oh, because my son was about 15 months at the time. He said, you can start EC with a child up to 18 months. So of course I bought the book and I started reading the book. I ordered the little patty. I attempted to introduce my son at the time. He wanted nothing to do with it. He was like, what is this thing that you are trying to sit me on? No, thank you. I would like to wear one of these, please. And just absolutely resistant, wanted nothing to do with it. I was obviously very inexperienced at the time. All I had was a little bit of knowledge from a book that I had only partially read. So I gave up, I put the potty away, and we did not revisit it until fast forward to he's about 2. My daughter was born when he was about 2 years and 1 month old. Everybody in my family said, don't try to start potty training right away because this is a big change. You're bringing a new baby into the family. There was a lot of changes in my family structure because my partner and I had actually been separated during our pregnancy, and then he came home right after my daughter was born. We could have a whole podcast just about that, but we're not going to go into that all here. But so he had come home. My daughter came home from the hospital. Just massive changes in our family life. And so everyone said, now is not the time to introduce something new, something potty training. Around this time, my son he's a big boy, still is a big boy. My partner is 6'6". So he was in the 4T, 5T pull-ups at the time. And every single morning he was waking up, had pooped in his pull-up in the bed. I would open the door to come and see him. I've got a newborn, so I'm like breastfeeding, I'm postpartum and exhausted. I walk in the door and you just get like hit in the face with a full-sized man poop smell. And you're just like, haven't had my coffee yet. And it's just like, this is not how I want to start my day. This went on for several weeks and it was not being contained by the diaper situation. It was coming out the sides. It was all like smeared inside the pajamas, on the bed sheets. This was every day for 6 weeks. Clay and I finally decided, you know what? This has got to stop. The poop has got to go in the toilet. We're done. So it was like, forget all of this, best practice. Don't introduce change right now. We went for it. My son, again, wanted nothing to do with it. He did not want to sit on the toilet. He did not want to sit on the potty. We knew his poop timing because he would generally also poop after dinner. Every night after dinner, we'd be like, okay, now's the time. We would like take his diaper off. We'd sit him on the toilet and we'd wait and nothing would happen. And if he really needed to go, do you know what he did? He got off the toilet. He started crying and he was begging me to put his diaper back on so that he could poop. And I was like, what have we done? This was a whole process. And so simultaneously, so I've got my 4 or 5 week old daughter at this point, and I had been finishing reading the Diaper Free book on Kindle on my phone in the middle of the night during those feeding sessions. I finally felt confident enough to give this a try. It seems kind of crazy. I don't know how it's going to work, but let's just see what happens. Similar to you, I had fed her, it was around 5 weeks, and she started getting fussy. I put her on my son's little baby Bjorn putty chair, and she peed right away, and she relaxed, and she looked at me, and just she was 5 weeks old, but she almost smiled. It was just this relief in her face. She was like, "You heard me." And I was like, oh, okay. So it was shockingly easy in that moment. And we were kind of like, that worked a whole lot better than all this we've been trying to do with our son. So let's just going. And I think we caught our first poop catch later that day. Again, we just put her on the potty after a meal. She then pooped because she was still pooping 4 to 6 times a day at that point. So there were lots of opportunities to catch something. And we just put her on the potty again when she was fussy, and now 1 and 2 came out, and we were like, well, that was cool, and that was really easy to clean up, and it's not in a cloth diaper, so let's keep trying this. So we're simultaneously potty training our 2-year-old with massive resistance and struggle. Clay is going back to work a week later. We're rebuilding our family's relationship because we have literally been separated in a custody battle for 6 months prior to the birth. Had no intentions of getting back together. Had gone through this horrifically traumatic birth experience with our daughter. She almost died, ended up in the NICU for a whole week. I did not even get to hold her until day 5. So we had gone through all of this, and then at 5 weeks old, we just tried EC, and it was the easiest thing we had done so far with everything else going on. And so Clay was going back to work at 6 weeks. I was going back to work full-time in my architecture job at 8 weeks. And we decided, let's just keep going as long as it's working for us. No pressure, no expectations. We're just going to see what happens. And so we did. It was incredible. And so if you know me and you've heard my story before, you've probably heard me share this, but I don't remember exactly, but it was between 8 to 10 weeks. We had only been doing this for a couple of weeks. She was actively communicating intentionally, with intention that she needed to potty. At that point, it looked like more facial expressions, and a lot of it's in the eyes and the eyebrows and kind of the look, as well as the sound and the fidgets and just the body language. And the way that she has communicated her signal has evolved as she has grown, and she has acquired more and more skills in her body. But even at 2 months old, she was intentionally asking for the potty. And we would be like, oh, we see you. You need to go potty. And we would take her, and she would pee or poop or both. And we just had this beautiful back and forth dance of she would let us know, we would take her, she would relax. And it was so easeful. There was so little crying, just far less crying than we had ever experienced with our son. Had a much more stressful postpartum period. In hindsight, I think I was struggling with postpartum anxiety with my son. Didn't know it at the time, but it was really, really hard. And I didn't really understand why. And there was just so much crying. And if you Google, now I've Googled this as part of the research that I do now with Ready from Birth, but if you Google how many hours a day is normal for a baby to cry, it's 4 to 5 hours a day is normal for a baby. And much of this is quote unquote unexplained crying for no apparent reason. And if you Google what is colic, this one's really interesting. What is colic? Again, we don't know why it happens. It is generally unexplained crying. It may be caused by gassiness, digestive issues. It is characterized by a red face, painful expression, loud crying for no apparent reason, and it generally peaks around 4 to 6 weeks. Do you know what else happens around 4 to 6 weeks? That is the point where your baby's reflex of communicating this need is peaking. And around 8 weeks, they first become aware of their body inside and out. And so it starts to shift from a reflex to an awareness. And that is the moment. And so I recommend this to anyone who is considering starting EC, that if you want to try it before you get to that 8-week moment, because that is leap 2 in your baby's brain development. It is when they start to become aware of their body. They feel what it feels like to poop or to have poop on them. So you are really in charge of setting the standard before then, so that if you are teaching your baby to use the potty, that's all they ever know. That's what they learn is normal. If you are teaching them to use a diaper and you want them to use a diaper, that is what they will learn is normal. And so you are in charge. There is no default. You get to decide what you're going to teach your baby. Crying will peak around that 4 to 6 week mark because your baby is asking for help. And if you're not responding, you are essentially training them to overcome that feeling in their body, to push past the instinct, to push past the reflex, and just learn that it's okay to poop in a diaper. They're not programmed to do that. You have to program them to do that. I've learned so much since I've started really researching this intentionally, but just in my experience alone, between my son and my daughter, it was a night and day difference. We had none of the unexplained crying. There was no colic. There was just a lot more peace in our home. I didn't suffer from postpartum anxiety, despite all of the other things that we had going on at the time. It was just such a more positive postpartum experience overall. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that all of our daughter's needs were being met, quite simply. Yeah.
That's the biggest takeaway that I learned. Just learning about EC from you and then implementing my daughter, it helped me to become more present and tune into your cues, as we talked about at the beginning, listening and looking for the cues for hunger, for sleep, but also to be able to eliminate pee and poop. And because of that, I truly believe the reason why babies cry is because we're not tuning into their cues. They're constantly communicating with us, right? And I see this time, and I hesitate to use a pacifier unless she's like really, really tired, and I know she's tired, she's not going down for a nap. Then I might use a pacifier. But other than that, all the sounds she makes, all the faces, facial expressions, I'm tuning in because I'm like, okay, that looks like she's getting really tired. Or while I'm feeding her, and I shared, because I just went through your challenge, and I shared with you, like, while I was breastfeeding her, what I noticed is that sometimes she'll stop and she'll make a little face, and I can see her abdomen just start to tense up and scrunch, and sometimes she'll grunt. And then all of a sudden I hear the sound of her making poop or pee. And then she goes back to feeding again. And that's one of the things I learned from you. While feeding her, put her on the potty, and because sometimes they'll go. And it makes sense because when you eat, it stimulates your GI tract. I mean, a lot of us tend
almost
to
instantly.
go poop or pee. After we eat as an adult. So babies too, right? I do believe EC just has helped me become even more in tune with her and her cues and what she's communicating. And as a result, she's way more happy. She's way more peaceful. But if I don't pick up on the right cue, or initially it took some time to learn, but say like she was hungry, but I put her on the potty to pee, she got really angry and fussy with me. So
because you got it wrong.
Learned and picked up because I got it wrong, exactly. So she let me know when I got it wrong, but that's okay. It helped me learn. It helped me learn to tune into her. I love it so much, and I'm so grateful that I'm bringing you on to talk about it, because I feel like more and more women need to hear about it and know that there's another option, because you're exhausted postpartum, and for a lot of women, the postpartum period isn't just 6 weeks. Sometimes it can be a couple years. So some women are still experiencing the after effects of postpartum, even 2-3 years when they're a toddler, and now you're trying to get your toddler to potty train, and they're just so used to pooping and peeing in their diaper that, like you said, there's that resistance. So you're hearing this and hearing Heather's story. If it sounds familiar, it might be something to look into, especially if you're expecting another child or want to have more children in the future. It can definitely make that transition so much easier. That's what I'm looking forward to, is having an easier transition, because I'm all about doing things to make things easy, having systems in place and making my life easier, not harder. Always about work smarter, not harder, right? And even for my kids, as I'm now navigating motherhood, I'm so grateful for people like you and having the tools and resources. There's the EC and the sleep training and all these things just to make each stage, each transition so much easier. Before we wrap up, can you share, if someone hasn't heard about EC and wants to start their journey, what are some of the common cues that they can look out for to tune into to get their baby on the potty to try the EC?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. When I teach this to the complete newbies in my audience, and I teach like a get started workshop, there's really kind of 3 levels that you can think of, like easy level, the medium, and the hard. So the easiest thing to do, especially if you are starting with a young baby, a newborn, so 0 to 3 months, is simply offer at every diaper change. Because your baby has not learned yet to use the diaper. They still want to not use the diaper. That's still their default. And so you will notice if you have a newborn that they somehow seem to always wait for you to take the diaper off on the changing table, and that's when they pee or poop. Who has had a pee or poop situation on the changing table? And as soon as air hits their body, they know. They are waiting for the offer. And so when you are taking the diaper off, that's what they want to do. If you are starting with a 0 to 3 month baby, the easiest way to get started is simply remove the diaper and promptly sit them on a potty. You can either have a potty next to you, you can take their diaper off in the bathroom and hold them over a toilet or a sink. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't really want my baby pooping in a sink. But just so you know, a exclusively breastfed baby, their poop is still water soluble and liquid. It's still very easy to rinse away with warm water and a little bit of dish soap. You will be good to go. As long as you are working with a young breastfed baby, that is entirely an option. You also can just hold them over the toilet. It's helpful to know the right way to hold them. And a lot of people are like, well, you can't just sit a newborn on a toilet. Of course not. I'm not recommending you do that. You absolutely have to make sure that you are correctly supporting their head and neck, just the way that you would if you're breastfeeding. So a really easy way to get started with a newborn is to hold them in a cradle hold position. So similar to if you were breastfeeding in a cradle hold and their head is in the crook of your arm, their body is across yours, and then you can just gently hold them underneath their thighs, pull up a little bit so that their legs and their booty and their body are making a kind of an N shape. You want to make sure their booty is a little bit below their knees. So it just helps their body do what their body needs to do. So you just want to kind of hold them gently underneath their thighs and then aim them into your vessel of choice. It could be a toilet, could be a sink, could be a bowl or a potty, a yogurt container, whatever you have on hand. It doesn't have to be fancy. If you have a toilet, you can do BC, and most of you do. So you can even do it outside. You can absolutely potty your baby over the ground outside. That is totally fine. I've done that many times. You just want to make sure that you're supporting them. As they get bigger and they have more head and neck control, you can kind of switch them to an upright position so that their head is resting kind of in your chest. Their back is supported by your sternum, and then you again hold them under their legs. That's a really easy hold to do right over the toilet. You just want to face towards the back of the toilet. So you're like reverse sitting on the toilet and you just potty them into the back. You can also use that in any public toilet situation. It's really easy to do. You just kind of squat down and hold them over the toilet low. You don't have to sit on the seat. I would never sit on a public toilet seat, but things to consider here. So that is a really great universal hold that you can use with any size baby of any age. As far as when to offer, so I mentioned if you have a newborn, offer at every diaper change. Just make sure you get them there quickly because, again, they will be prone to want to go immediately. I do want to add, once you start offering consistently, you will find that your baby will start to wait for the potty offer. I hear from newborn parents all the time that their baby will start to hold their poop and wait for the offer within as little as a few days after starting EC. So a lot of people have a belief that babies are not capable of holding their bladder or their bowels until they are much older. So we're talking 18 to 24 months. It's this very nebulous, much older time frame that nobody's quite sure about. The reason for that is because if you have a diaper change child and you're trying to introduce potty training later, they've never had a reason to practice holding it. They've never had a reason to use those muscles, to connect the body awareness with the action, with holding and releasing their pelvic floor intentionally. They're wearing a diaper. They can just go anytime, anywhere with no consequences. Nobody's worried about it. The offer is never going to come. So if you have a diaper change child, of course they're going to have no control. They've never had any practice. These are muscles, just like their leg muscles or their neck muscles, all of the muscles that your baby is developing strengthen as they grow. They can't walk the day they're born. They can't crawl the day they're born. They have to learn how to strengthen and control those muscles. Their pelvic floor is no different. So once you start to introduce the putty and give your baby the chance to use it, that's what they're wanting to do. And so they will start to wait and hold it almost immediately. And the more you practice with them and that you're consistent with them from the beginning, they're going to be able to hold it for longer and longer and longer stretches. And that is how you build strength in their pelvic floor. And that is how you have a fully potty trained, diaper free child by 12 months old. So it is absolutely possible when you start from birth or shortly thereafter. So level 2, this would be like if your baby's older than 3 months or you're trying to do it a little bit more intentionally, you would offer on what I call the ins and outs. So this is about offering at transitions. Anytime you're putting your baby into a baby holder of any kind or getting them out of a baby holder of any kind. So baby holder is anything that is constricting your baby's movement, putting pressure on their pelvic floor. So we're talking about car seats, strollers, baby carriers, high chairs for older babies, bouncers, anything like that that is constricting them. Because babies have this very powerful instinct not to poop on themselves, not to soil themselves in the beginning. If you are putting your baby into a car seat in the beginning, before they have become completely conditioned to just use the diaper, they don't want to go while they're in the car seat. As soon as you get them out, that's when they're going to want to go. So that's when you would offer. And same goes for if you're wearing your baby in a wrap or a ring sling. As soon as you get them out of the carrier, that is the time to offer because that's when they're going to want to go now that there's room in their diaper to do so. They don't want to go when they're all pressed up against you and everything's tight to their body. So the best time to offer and catch something is immediately after you pull them out. And the same goes for feeding. As soon as you are done feeding your baby, that is a great time to offer because as we talked about, breast milk, solids, once they get to that point, that's all stimulating their digestion. And they're either going to have to pee or poop or both within a few minutes of eating. So that is a great time to catch something. You want to be cognizant of the ins and outs. And the reason I also say offering on the ins is a little bit more advanced, but when you are giving your baby a chance to go before you put them into the carrier, the car seat, you're going on an outing, if they are, let's say, 60 to 80% full, they'll go. They need to go enough that they will go ahead and relieve themselves. And so now they're empty. You can start your activity or your trip or whatever you're doing at the baseline energy level. And so your baby is comfortable. They're in that like Zen state because they probably just ate, they just pottied. They're like, okay, I'm ready for the day. And so that brings me to level 3, which is watch for the shift. This is what I call true EC, true elimination communication, where you're not just offering on your schedule or at diaper changes, you're really starting to watch for the signal and pay attention. If you have pottied your baby, now their baseline energy level, now you watch for the change. You watch for them to go from calm and still to fidgety and loud, or they start fussing or kicking their leg really hard or starting to get down out of the carrier. You watch for that change in their behavior. And some babies will become very agitated, very irritable. Other babies will kind of have a downshift. They'll get very still. They'll get very quiet, where they were actively playing. You'll see this a lot more in older babies. They'll go from like loud and playing and happy to kind of like quiet, still, retreating. Many older babies will hide once they're mobile. You have to notice that change and be close enough to them to notice that change in order to see it. And when you notice that, that's when you would take them and offer. So the 3 levels, every diaper change, offering on the ins and outs, and watch for the shift, which is true elimination communication. And eventually they will start asking you intentionally. And so it becomes less about you observing and more about them communicating and telling you. And once you open up that 2-way communication between the two of you, it is like freedom like no other.
I feel like it's the first stage is just building trust because I'm starting before 3 months. I started at 5 days and we're now 8 weeks. it's starting to build that trust. She's trusting me that I'm picking up on her cues and meeting her needs, right? And then eventually, once it gets to the point where I can start signing with her and she starts communicating back, it just continues to build that trust. And it helps with allowing her to be confident too, and knowing that, okay, mom's going to take me to the potty when I ask it. And eventually she'll get to the point where your daughter's now letting you know, like, hey, mom, I need to go poo or pee. And then she goes and does it. So
she does it
yeah,
completely on her own now
gradual,
with zero help.
yeah,
It's amazing. I'm like, wow.
That is amazing. Yeah. Every time you share a story of your daughter and her just going on her own, I'm just blown away, because she's almost, what, 2 years? 2 years old now?
She's 21 months right now, but
Amazing.
she first went to the potty and sat down on her own, unassisted, with zero help, zero prompting for me, because I was busy with my son in the kitchen. He was demanding me do something with him. I was just unable to focus on her, and she needed to go poop. And so she left the kitchen. She went over to her potty where it was in the adjacent room. She was not walking yet, but she could cruise. And so she cruised across the cabinet, backed up, and sat down on her potty. I found her a few minutes later sitting on her potty, reading a book with poop in the toilet. I was like, honey, we have arrived. It was amazing. And so what I learned from that is that sometimes it requires us to step back in order for our babies to begin to take the initiative. They aren't relying on us. They actually need us to give them space for that independence, and that's when they will step up to the plate and show us what they're really capable of.
To just control in different areas of our life. That's something that I learned as a mom. There's levels of moments and opportunities where I'm like learning to surrender control, because I want to control, right? And the potty training is surrendering control and allowing your baby to communicate with you, which in turn just builds that self-trust and that self-confidence in them long term too. So it's full cycle, you know. They're supporting you and you're supporting them, and I love that so much. So goodness, Heather, I really enjoyed our conversation today, and thank you for just all the insights and the knowledge that you've shared. And there's so much that you just continue to share and pour into. I mean, you have a community for additional support and guidance, and you share so much on your Instagram and your YouTube. I'd love for you to just share, where can people find you and learn more about you and the work that you do and be a part of this community that you've created?
Yeah, thank you. So you can find me on Instagram at readyfrombirth.ec. I'm also on YouTube at Ready From Birth. So I have a whole library of free content that can help you get started with EC at any age of your baby. So it's easiest to start between 0 to 12 months. You can still sometimes get started later. It kind of depends on your baby's temperament and history, but it's not out of the question. So I highly recommend you start early. It's going to be much, much easier. You can check it out at YouTube. I also have a course that is comprehensive. It's the entire process from EC with your baby starting at birth all the way to full toilet independence with your young, just walking toddler. So that's Born Ready, and I have all the links for that on my Instagram. And I do have a community as well for people who are looking to connect with other parents doing EC as well, get ongoing support, and just make sure that they are held and guided every step of this journey. As I experienced when I was first getting started, I didn't know anyone who was doing this. There was no one to turn to see how this was done or to ask questions. And it was really like, okay, we're just kind of figuring this out on our own. And so I have a community for people to come together and join a village of like-minded parents who also value independence and empowerment in their babies.
Too, because I was with you at the beginning stages, and then just things really took off for you, and now you have the community and you have so many resources that people can have access to just to learn more. And I'll put all the links in the show notes so you can check out Heather, go give her a follow, reach out to her, let her know what your takeaways are from this episode, what you've learned. Heather, thank you again. Thank you again for your time, for just sharing all your knowledge and your story. I'm just excited just to continue to learn and grow with you as we continue this journey together.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much.